Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time you're watching or listening to this, and welcome to another episode of the Non-Identity Podcast. Now, this week we're joined by someone whose mental health struggles led him on a journey to build a community on TikTok and also author a book. It's Jason G. Holmes. Hi, Jason. Welcome to the show.
Hello, Lee. Thanks for having me.
No worries. Before we get into what you're doing now, can you just let everyone know who you are and where you grew up and stuff?
Yeah, so kind of similar to the title of the book, Sorry I'm Not Famous, my life's just been pretty much like everybody's life. You know what I mean? You know, there's nothing exciting or special about it, although it is exciting and special to me because it's my life. But grew up in Bolton, moved down south for a little while, had a bit of the accent that you've got there for a short time, but I quickly lost it when I came up north. So I don't know whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. We'll let the viewers decide on that one. Spent most of my life just kind of, I suppose the best way to describe it is trying to find where I was meant to be. Grew up without a dad, and for me, that meant that I kind of spent a lot of time looking for a male role model without really realizing it, and kind of found different tribes when I went to different companies and thought, oh, maybe that's what I want from life, or maybe that's what I want from life, and never really figuring it out for myself, always wanting to copy and paste what somebody else had. So I spent a lot of time working in the graphic design industry, made a lot of good friends in that space, and wanted to become a teacher. Started doing some university lectures, guest lecturing, and things like that. Always been a bit of an entrepreneur as well. Had that little spark inside me to do something different, and well, that takes you pretty much up to the age of around about 30, which is when COVID hit and when my depression hit, and that's kind of just a little bit about me, I suppose.
Do you think growing up without a father might have helped wanted you to inspire to be a teacher? Because my mum left us when I was 9, and I got into I've been working in education for the last 20 years. So do you think maybe wanting something that wasn't there, you then want to input that in to help other young people?
100%. That's something that I didn't actually realize at first. I wasn't sure why I wanted to be a teacher, but I was. Yeah, and I was asked back. I went to university as a mature student and absolutely blitzed it. Really enjoyed my time there, made some really good friends. And then within a year, I was asked to go back and give some guest lectures on life after uni. And me being a bit of an OCD perfectionist, I had this great lesson plan where I was engaging with everyone and had people laughing. And I was only supposed to be there for an hour. And I was there for 4 hours. And the kids were coming up to me afterwards and asking me so many, well, I say kids, they're 19, 20s, but they were asking me so many questions and were so fascinated by my journey and my take on the industry. And mainly because I was just kind of open and honest, and I wasn't adhering to, because as a guest lecturer, you don't have to adhere to Ofsted's kind of standards. You can just go in and do your own thing. So that was the big thing that made me absolutely love it, and having that engagement from everyone and realizing, you know what, I actually have something to offer here, and I can offer it in my own unique way. And there's people who are receptive of it, and I think that was the main thing. It was the reception that I got from the students that made me pursue it. Circumstances made it not happen, mainly COVID, kind of the way of getting in the way of everyone's life. But I do believe things happen for a reason, and I'm quite happy with where I am now, so it's all good.
Yeah, so you said earlier on that COVID was the time that you fell into your depression and anxiety. First of all, how was the journey to get into that point? But also, how do you realise it's depression and anxiety? Because it seems like depression and anxiety is thrown about a lot.
So the truth is, for the first 2 years, I didn't know. I started it. So my story goes back to the first person that I lost around about the age of 30 was a friend of mine called Howard. And the way that happened was I got a phone call at about 8:30 one evening, and they said, "Oh, Jason, we've been looking and trying to track you down. Howard's died." And I was like, "What? How?" And the funeral's tomorrow morning at 10 a.m. And I'm like, "Wow, that's a lot to kind of take in. No grieving time, no. And so I had to take the morning off work, go to this funeral, couldn't go to the wake, get back into work, and it was just like, grieve, he's gone, done. And I was upset. Obviously, I cried my eyes out at the funeral, and I'm like, wow, that's a really close friend of mine just gone out of my life. But I never grieved, if that makes sense. Like I grieved on the day, but I never grieved properly. Went back to work, got back on with my life. Within a short space of time, I said I grew up without a dad. So I met my dad when I was 12. And he, as far as I'm aware, there's some family dispute about this, but from my perspective, he pretty much left before I was born, or around about a year after I was born, somewhere around that figure. Never had anything to do with him. Um, and then I'd questioned where he was when I was 12 years old. So I got to meet him. We had a few weeks together. Nothing really gelled. I felt unwanted. So as a kid, you kind of want to feel wanted, don't you? So I never went back to his house. He never chased me. And the next time I heard about him was, I think I was 28. And his son rang me up and said, "Your dad's in hospital. He's had a massive heart attack. Doesn't look like he's going to make it through the night. I didn't know whether you'd want to go and say goodbye or not." So it was really weird, and so I did go and I held his hand and we both cried. And I said, "Why did you never call me?" And he just said, "I don't know. I don't know." Now, the weird thing was he survived that, but he had I think it was something like a perforated heart valve or something like that. And basically, they couldn't operate on him. They could keep him alive, but they couldn't operate on him. And he waited for 2 years to see if he would improve, where he could get to an operation, and then eventually lost his life. And then that coincided with within about a few months of Howard dying. So that was weird because that was like mourning the loss of a life that I perhaps should have had. And I went to the funeral and I felt really out of place at the funeral, like with all these other family members. So I'm like, are they related to me? Are they not? Nobody really, spoke to me. Not at first, anyway. So those two things, and then COVID hitting as well. I'd bottled them up. I hadn't dealt with them, and I hadn't spoke to anyone about it. And it was in the middle of the night. I woke up at around about 2 o'clock in the morning, and I felt like someone was stood on my chest, literally a full human being stood on my chest. And I'm like, what on earth is happening to me? And I took myself to A&E, and they hooked me up to everything. And they said, "You're fine, you can go home." And I'm like, I'm not fine. Something happened. It might not be here anymore, but something definitely happened to me. I'm telling you. So they said, well, everything's fine. If anything happens again, ring 111 or whatever. And then some loveliness. And to this day, I wish I knew who she was, because I'd love to go and give her a bunch of flowers. But she came, and it was a really busy night. And she came and put her hand on my shoulder and she asked me, "What's going on in your life right now?" And I said, "Well, Dad's died, and a friend of mine died recently as well. And there was trouble with work, and there was trouble with the relationship that I was having at the time." And, blah, blah. And she says, "Oh, you're going through a lot. Who do you speak to about it?" And I said, "No one." I'm a bloke. We don't do that. And she says, "Oh no, I think what you've had, darling, is a panic attack." And I was like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of those," but I had no idea what they entailed. So she explained it to me, and thus began the kind of journey of these panic attacks started happening quite regularly, which freaked me out a little bit. So in that kind of next 18 months, from losing Howard to losing my dad, having the panic attacks, and then I just thought, well, I'm having panic attacks and that's that. I started putting on weight. I started feeling tired even when I'd had 8 hours sleep. I'd go and walk my dog, and I'd come home and I'd get back in bed. My temper started getting short with people. I was getting angry with people who hadn't, and it's not right, my kind of thing, to get angry. And I'm like, and it's weird. It's weird how all this stuff was happening, and my brain didn't connect the dots. Like the fact that I was putting on weight, it's nothing to do with me. The washing machine must be shrinking my clothes. The fact that I'm tired, yeah, the fact that I'm tired, it must just mean I'm working too hard or something like that. And somebody said to me, I can't remember who it was, but someone said to me, "Do you think you might be suffering from depression?" And I said, "Well, isn't depression just feeling sad?" And they said, "Well, the difference between the two is sad is, I feel down, I feel a bit miserable, the sky's grey. Depression is you don't want to get up in the morning. Depression can be going and having a fantastic day at work and laughing and joking with all your friends, and then coming home and feeling empty inside." And I'm like, "Oh, that resonates." And that's been resonating for a long time. So I was around about 18 months in, I was considering maybe I have been suffering from depression. Realizing that I got it, I had another bit of a breakdown, massive panic attack again, crying a lot. And I went to the doctors and they said, "Yeah, And I said, what do I do? Like, for me, that was a big effort to go to the doctors and actually admit. And the doctor was quite dismissive, which didn't really help it. He kind of says, yeah, I think you're suffering from depression. We can either do medicine or therapy. Which one do you want? And that was it. That was the extent of his advice. And I'm like, well, okay, I think I'd rather do the therapy. I'd like to get to the bottom of it. And he says, right, that's fine, but there's probably a 6-month wait, and it kind of felt like next, and I'm like, wow, okay, that was a bit of an anticlimax. So I had to start coming to terms with the fact that just because I realized that I'd been suffering from depression, that doesn't mean that I can snap out of it. Like, it's going to be with me a long time. And that's something that I struggled with at first. And then in the next, I think, 18 months, I lost 3 uncles. And that was during the COVID time. So 2 died from cancer within a month of one another. And we believe that the 3rd one died about a year later. All we can think is he died from a broken heart because he'd lost his brothers, because they never got anything back on the autopsy. It said heart failure, but we think it was, the fact of he lost his closest pals. So I held it together for everyone still during my depression, which made it even worse. I took on all this responsibility of helping arrange the funerals, being there for my mum, being there for my sister, being there for my auntie and my gran, not being there for myself, not making any time to open up. And so I got further and further into this depression, and I remember the turning point for me was, it was around about let's say about 3 years in, and New Year's Day for me is the happiest time of the year, right? I love the idea of a new beginning, new start, new habits. Even if they only last 2 or 3 weeks, I don't care. It's a good chance to start afresh. And I've always kind of been excited about that ever since I've been an adult. And this one particular New Year's Day, I just woke up and I just felt lost. I had no energy, and it freaked me out a little bit. So I phoned the Samaritans, and I'm like, I'm not suicidal. I said, but I'm questioning why I should even be here. I don't get the purpose of life, and they said to me, like, can we say why you're not suicidal? And I said, well, I'm too kind. I said, I know how many people it would hurt, and they said, and they were brilliant, honestly. Anyone who's suffering, I massively advocate the Samaritans, because they said, look, we'd rather people ring now, like when you are, because a lot of people wait till it's too late. They wait till they're literally or metaphorically on that cliff edge, and so they said, you've done the right thing, and they pointed me in the direction of more talking therapy, which was brilliant. And it was the talking therapy that really kind of saved my life, because that was the opportunity to offload all those problems that I'd been bottling up, that for some reason I couldn't share it with my family. My friends didn't really understand where I was coming from. And having this stranger sat in front of me in 4 walls and no judgment, no pressure, just talking. And we had 10 sessions together. And then I think it was 6 months later, I said, look, I need to do this again. I booked him with another therapist. And it massively let me let go of all this emotions that I didn't realize that I'd been bottling up. And it was just an amazing journey. It really was. And on top of that, which I've wrote about in the book, is I found, being an entrepreneur, I was naturally interested in self-development and motivational speaking and all this kind of stuff. So I think all the bits and pieces that I was learning from that kept my mind thinking, there's a business somewhere in this, for me in the future. I had all these business ideas. When I get my health back on track, I was planning my life after depression. And that's what kept me going, as well as my dog and photography. Molly was the one reason, that's my dog, that kept me getting up every single morning. I had to go and walk her. She's not one of these dogs who looks at the weather and goes, nah, I'll go back in. She wants to be out every day. So she gave me a reason to get out of bed in the morning. I had to go and walk her. And even if I walked her and then went back into bed, didn't matter. At least I'd been out for a walk. And while I was out, that made me meet new people, which, if you're suffering from depression, it is really, really important. Getting to speaking to people, even if it's just for 5 minutes a day. And then I started taking photographs of my dog, started taking photographs of their dog. They then started getting really happy because saying, oh, these photographs are amazing. I was like, are they? And then I discovered a new hobby. So I started taking up photography, and that gave me a bit of purpose every day then. So my purpose in the morning was get up, go and take pictures of everyone's dogs, and if you know photography and you know the British weather, you're going to get a different shot every single day. It can go from snow, sleet, hail, tornadoes, summer, all in one day.
I totally resonate with what you're saying, because when I went through my depression after my wife was ill, because I was working in a special needs school, we stayed open during COVID, but I'm a trained mental health first aider and I'm a level 4 counsellor. So I was understanding my feelings and thoughts, but I couldn't get myself out of the funk. But then also, I'm standing in front of a group of students, teaching them how to cope with anxiety and panic attacks while I'm going through depression. So I was getting myself even more wound up, because I understood the feelings, but I just couldn't get myself out of it. And I didn't do talk therapy, but I did counselling sessions with a voluntary organisation. And the bloke, because it was telephone, it really helped, because I read people's expressions. So if I see that you're feeling sorry for me or you're feeling sad for me, I close off. So I don't want to put that onto other people. But the fact that I couldn't see him felt like I could just offload everything. But it took me 6 weeks to sort of come around to his way of thinking, because he kept saying to me, live in the present, don't worry about the future, and you can't get back the past. And I'm like, yeah, but what if the present's shit? Like that. So, and he's like, I don't mean it like that, I just mean get yourself through the day. It took me 6 weeks to come round, and his advice was brilliant. So I literally finished my day at 10:30 p.m, good or bad, because that's what time I usually go to bed. And no matter what's happened, the next day's a new day. And then I can't dwell, because I think I felt very angry with the world because of what happened to my wife. I've got issues from my mum leaving me when I was 9. My brother died of a drug overdose 8 years ago. So I think I had all these life-changing experiences going around me, and I feel like because I wasn't picking for them to happen, it got me more in a deeper funk, if that makes sense. Because it weren't my choosing; it was everything around me falling apart, and I feel like I've had nothing to do with this. So why is it's not fair? And that made me dead angry. Did you feel angry with the fact that you was losing people and stuff?
That's a good question. I don't think I ever felt anger. I just think it's weird. It's like, for me, it was like adrenaline took over, and it's like, right, I just have to get through this period for everybody else. And especially when you lose someone, there's that whole, we've got to close the accounts, we've got to clear the house out, we've got to pay for the funeral, then we've got to go to the wake. And for me, I thought that after the wake, then that's it, everything's done. But going through, just if anyone's ever done that, literally going through the whole clearing someone's house, setting up the funeral, giving the speeches, that is mentally draining in itself. And then having to say goodbye on top of that. So for me, like I said, it was just a case of adrenaline took over. Let's get through this part, this moment, and then I'll deal with feelings later. But I never did deal with feelings later. And then something else came along where I could kind of just put it to the back of my mind. And I didn't realize that putting stuff to the back of your mind and then keep putting, our brains only have limited storage space, and eventually something's got to give. And yeah, I don't think I'll ever do that again. For example, I lost someone just before Christmas. And yeah, it's okay. And he was a good friend of mine, and he had been battling cancer for 10 years. And the attitude that I had towards him dying was a much, much different attitude now that I've been through depression. So I allowed myself time to think of him. I literally built it into one of my days where I was like, I'm just going to spend 60 minutes just sat thinking about Steve, thinking about all the good times we had together, what he did for me as a person. And that was enough. That's all I needed. And then the other thing that I thought is, instead of mourning that he's gone, I'm going to remember all the happy times that we had. And there's a lot of cultures that celebrate death rather than mourn it. Celebrate someone's life rather than mourning that they've gone. And I thought, what a great way, reframing a negative into a positive. And yeah, so every cloud silver lining. Do you know what I mean? Like I've learned a lot from the people that I've lost. And sometimes we have to go through that, like you said, in order to understand our emotions and then to do something about it. Sometimes you have to allow yourself the emotional, oh my God, I'm suffering, like you said, from anger. And then, now what can I do about it so that that doesn't happen again in the future?
Why do you think as men we struggle with that? Because obviously men's suicide rates are very high. Men don't like sitting around talking about their feelings. And also, just linking in with that, do you think you got dismissed quickly at the doctors because you was male as well? So do you think society plays a part in that as well?
Absolutely, it does. I mean, I've working in graphic design. I started being fascinated by psychology and sociology. So, for people who don't know, sociology is the study of groups. And one of the things that I found fascinating is that this study that I read that said in any social setting. So this is not just exclusive to men. Nobody likes to feel like the odd one out,
Yeah.
right? And if you go back to school, you know, think about all the things that you've wanted to say in your life, and I better not say that in case someone makes fun of me. And what I realised was that that happens probably a lot more with men about holding that in because I want to be accepted in this social circle of, let's say, 5 other guys. So we get good at catching our thoughts and just saying, no, I'm not doing that, just in case someone ridicules me. The issue is, I think a lot of men do that too far, and they take it with, like I said, thoughts of mourning and thoughts of grief and loss and struggle, and they bottle everything up. And the other issue with that as well is, this is what this study said, was often what people will do, male or female, they'll sacrifice the most unique part of themselves in order to fit in amongst a social circle. And when I read that, that really hit hard. I was like, you know what? I've always been like this bit of a spiritual kind of guy. Like, I'm not religious, but like, I'm quite happy to see signs or whatever, or believe in the power of the universe. Or, you know, if I see 3 deer, I thought, maybe there's a reason that I've seen them, you know. And I never wanted to tell anybody stuff like that because I was like, someone's going to make fun of me. And having gone through what I've gone through now, I'm like, do you know what? I don't give a shit anymore. I'm quite happy to share that with anyone. And if you don't agree with me, then you're not the right person for my life. And so, yeah, I think society does still have that stigma. Men still are frightened of opening up. And I think it all starts with the playground, basically, or maybe you could say that's parenting. I don't know. But it definitely, for me, I think it starts at the playground, not wanting to feel like the odd one out at school.
I totally agree with that. I work in an all-boys school, so I see a lot of that. Be it in the playground, the difference compared to the one-to-one conversations, they're not the same people if you see them one-on-one to in the playground. So I totally agree with what you're saying. So you decided to write the book. Was that to help with your mental health journey? Or was that to help give advice to others?
Both. So I started feeling that life was changing for me. Right, I felt I can't put my finger on it, and I can't just say like it was this magical moment or anything, but I slowly felt that life was getting better and that I was coming out of depression. That's just how it felt to me. It felt like someone had a little dial and they were just going like that, you know, slowly. And I had this idea of, do you know what? Maybe I should write all this stuff down that I've been going through, and the stuff that is, you know, the journey, purely because of what we've spoken about, like this stigma behind, especially men. But I thought it's not necessarily has to be exclusive to men, the book, but this stigma about not sharing what it is that you're going through. So I had this idea that when I finished the book, that's me closing the chapter on my depression part of my life. That's what I told myself in my head. As soon as the book's self-published it with Amazon, but as soon as that's published, that's me closing that chapter of my life, and that's me allowing myself to move on to the next step of my life. And you know, that's what I kept telling myself over and over again. And touch wood, that's exactly what happened. Literally, the day that I published the book, I was like, right, this is day one of New Jason, and life's been pretty good since then, thankfully.
Do you think you can actually get over depression fully, or do you think you come up with coping strategies and mechanisms that makes it manageable?
Well, my talking therapist said something beautiful, which was, we never fully recover, we just get better at coping. And the way I see it is everything that you do that's a positive change. So everything that you go through, where you can learn something for it. My analogy is, think of yourself like someone from the 1800s going into war, right? And every time you learn something new about a coping mechanism or a strategy, whether it's to do with ADHD, whether it's to do with anxiety or depression or whatever, that's like a shoulder plate and then another shoulder plate and then a helmet and a sword and a shin pad. And you just, all you're doing is you're getting more and more armed for battle. So, and you're still going to have to battle. Someone's still going to swing a big bloody sword at you. But the more you learn and the more you try and teach yourself and the more you educate yourself on different coping mechanisms and try different coping mechanisms, the better you should be able to cope, in theory, when those problems will arise in the future. Because, like I said I was over depression, and I do believe that I'm over my depression after a 5-year journey with it. But that doesn't mean that people aren't going to die in the future of my life. That doesn't mean I might not, lose a job or have a hard time or something might go wrong with money or a relationship. Those things are still going to happen to me. It's about how I choose to react to them now, based on what I've learned, and hopefully, with everything that I've learned, I've got enough strategies in place to stop myself falling back into that old version of myself.
Brilliant. And also, you now setting up using TikTok as a platform to pass on your message of your mental health journey and to help support others, and you're building a sense of community. Again, why did you decide to do that? Because obviously, social media is a place. It's a double-edged sword. I find it's a great place to get advice and meet a fantastic community, but then also you've got the others that are trying to bring you down at the same time.
It's interesting. So while I was on social media, whilst I was depressed, I was speaking to my niece, and she said to me, I was saying, I think I'm going to come off all social media. Like, I'm fed up with it, and I'm fed up with how brilliant everybody's life is. And my niece, bless her, who was probably, I don't know, 12 at the time, something like that. She said, "Why don't you join TikTok?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't want to join TikTok. This dancing." And she's, "No, it's not like that. It's not like that." And she said, "Join it anonymously. Don't tell any of your friends that you're doing it." And I was like, "Actually, that's not a bad idea." So at first, I joined it anonymously, and I started posting. My early content was called "Things to Consider." So I always like educating myself, and I'm the type of person who will sit on the fence with most things. Like, I like always hearing 2 points of view. So that's why I call them "Things to Consider." And that kind of took off really well, and I ended up with like 25,000 followers like within a few months, and I'm like, "Whoa, I'm pretty good at this TikTok thing." I don't believe that anymore. I think I just won the TikTok lottery, that some people do. But so I then kind of went stagnant on it for a while, didn't do anything, and I decided that I was gonna. Well, it's just random. One day I just decided, do you know what? I might start doing some mental health stuff on there, see what it goes like. And then within probably a couple of weeks, the community started showing themselves to me, and I was like, wow, there's a lot of people here. And just going back to what we said about the schoolyard and being frightened of what you say and stuff, I found that these people on the TikTok community were not like that at all. They were all lived experience. I've been through this. It's okay to share. It's okay to not be okay. All those kind of things. And I'm like, you know what? I really like this. And I started getting positive feedback from people. So that was me originally just posting on my feed. And then I thought, you know what? I'm going to try and do the live streams as well. And that was a daunting thing for me. I've always been good at talking and public speaking, but still, sat on a TikTok platform where it says one person is in your life. And it's like, right, okay, what do I do? So the first couple of times, nothing really happened. I was just kind of waiting. I thought, I thought it was going to be like just waiting at a bus stop, and then a lot of people were just going to show up, and it just didn't happen like that. So what I decided to do was just start talking, and see how I was going, see how things, what came out of my mouth, so to speak. And someone actually commented at first and says, "Who are you talking to, mate? There's no one here." And I'm like, "Oh my God." So I just thought, just ignore him, keep going. And I'm so glad that I did, because then some people did come in and they're like, "I love this. You've got a great message." That boosted my confidence. And then off the back of that, people started sending me direct messages and saying, "You've helped me so much tonight. Thank you so much." And those are people who hadn't actually even contributed in the group. So that made me realize, and we were talking about this just before we started this live, about you never know who's watching. It doesn't matter if it's just one person or 100 people. You could inspire that one person, and that's what really resonated with me is, do you know what? There's people here that I can help, and it doesn't matter if they comment or if they don't. I've got a message. I've lived experience. Let's just share it and see what happens.
Yeah, well, you're a much braver person than me. I think I've done 2 lives. They both were boxing events, so I was just commentating on the boxing. I've done over 40 interviews, and I'm fine with this, but because I know I've got that edit button, it makes me more comfortable. As soon as it's live, it throws me. So you're much braver. And are you finding the fact that now people coming to you for advice, is that daunting, like, to think to yourself, are people actually want my advice and stuff like that? Or do you find that helpful in your journey?
Yeah. So I had one close friend for quite some time who kept telling me that I needed to get into the coaching space, and I was like, kind of a bit of imposter syndrome. And and he says, no, you've got tons of good advice, and you can share your journey with people, and you can definitely help people. And I was like, yeah, but what am I coaching them with? And he said, just personal growth. He says all the stuff that you've implemented, people, will want to hear that and want to understand it. And then he was telling me how much I should charge, and it was like, 999 quid for a 12-week course. And I'm like, no, 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 I can't do that. Let's just give it to him for free. And that was my imposter syndrome kicking in. So I think we met somewhere in the middle of around about 500 quid. And he said, look, let me do it for you. Right. And I said, right, okay. And he went out and got me some customers, and I went together and put the course together as best as I could. And I'm quite selective with who I work with, so I don't just pick anyone. Like, you've got to be wanting to change yourself. Like, I have the, you've all heard the story. You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. So you've got to kind of be wanting to change yourself before I will work with someone like that, because otherwise it's just I'm taking your money for no good reason. And some people need medical help rather than personal growth coaching. So the first couple of times that I did that, I was like, oh my God, they're actually buying it. They're listening to what I'm saying, they're implementing it, and they're sending me updates via WhatsApp. And I'm like, right, okay. And he told me this really good story, my friend Mark. And he said, he talked to me about Roger Bannister, who was the first guy to break the 4-minute mile. And he said, after Roger Bannister broke that 4-minute mile, within the first year of that, something like 400 people went and broke it as well. See, they had to see it first before they could believe that they could do it. And that's exactly what happened with me. I had to see it first. Someone had to guide my hand a little bit and push me into the deep end before I realized, do you know what? Yeah, I can do this. But I still kind of felt a bit, I don't like the idea of just doing it and taking money off people. And that's why I'm quite happy to still come on TikTok and, give as much free advice as possible. And there's plenty of people in the world where some could be customers and some just can be TikTok fans, and I had to just get out of my own head. So yeah, it was daunting, and it still kind of is to this day. It's something that I'm still working on, which is strange to say as a personal growth coach, but I'm definitely still working on it. I think what keeps me going is that I've got other businesses that I run as well. So I can dip in and out of everything rather than just thinking, oh, my effort has to be focused on this one thing. So that helps.
Brilliant. And if people want to buy the book or get in contact with you, where can they go?
So my TikTok is at Jason G Holmes. There's a link tree on there with all the bits and places where you can follow me. And the book is just available on Amazon. It's called Sorry, I'm Not Famous.
And we'll put the links in the description below so people can get there quicker.
Thank you so much.
No worries. Right, we're coming to the end of the interview. It's been a fascinating conversation. I've got one last question, and this question I ask every guest. Now, your answer or advice will not change your life's journey so far, but if you had 30 seconds with your 13-year-old self, what would you say?
30 seconds with my 13-year-old self?
Yeah.
Oh, good question. You're going to have to give me 30 seconds to think of the answer, though. Say is everything that you think that you're going to do when you get older, do it now. So, like, I had so many opportunities to go to different countries, to travel, to set up businesses, and I stopped it all purely based on what we was talking about earlier, which was fitting in that social circle. So forget social circles, forget friends, do what you want to do and follow that journey as soon as possible. Friends will come and go out of your life plenty of times. But yeah, take the opportunities that are in front of you. Don't think that, I'll have time when I'm 30 or 40.
Well, Jason, thank you so much for your time this evening. And guys, please head over to Jason's TikTok. I was in a live last week, and it is a real fascinating and really good advice being given.
Thank you so much, Lee. Massively appreciate it. And kudos to you as well for what you're doing. I love this.